This afternoon at precisely 3:47, a New York State Supreme Court judge issued the decisive order that set everything in motion for the enforcement phase in the long-running civil fraud case. The judge declared, in effect, the question before the court is whether Donald Trump and his organization must now face immediate asset enforcement due to the outstanding judgment. The parties have failed to secure the required appeal protections, so the clerk will proceed with the enforcement directive. The courtroom remained completely still. With the full $464 million penalty hanging over them after the appeal bond fell apart, the process unfolded over the following minutes, as officials reviewed the list of assets eligible for control or seizure. By 4:04, the judge received the final confirmation and rose to deliver the ruling that marks a first in this kind of high-profile business dispute. He stated clearly, "On this determination, the count stands at full authorization for enforcement. The required threshold has been met, and under state law, Donald Trump is now subject to seizure of designated properties, including Mar-a-Lago, effective right away." The room reacted immediately. A few observers stood and expressed quiet approval. Others remained seated, visibly shocked. Just 3 minutes later, at 4:07 from his location, likely still at one of his properties, Donald Trump went online with a statement, "This court action lacks legitimacy and holds no validity. I reject this enforcement entirely. I continue to hold full rights over my estates, including Mar-a-Lago. I will carry on managing them and will not surrender control." Subscribe to the channel right away, because what we're stepping into now is not the conclusion of this legal battle, it's the start of its most volatile stage. The court has authorized seizure of the estate, but Trump is openly refusing to comply. And for the coming hours, or possibly days, the nation could see two conflicting claims over who controls Mar-a-Lago and other key holdings, with no straightforward way to settle the dispute. Turn on all notifications, because the developments over the next day could decide if the civil justice system holds firm, or if we slide into a deeper breakdown where court orders lose force when met with determined resistance. Let's look closely at how that enforcement decision played out, because the details show why it reached this point and which factors pushed it over the edge. The process started at 3:47 when the judge began confirming the asset list in order. Various properties came under review, starting with New York holdings and moving to out-of-state ones. The atmosphere shifted noticeably when the discussion turned to Florida assets, including Mar-a-Lago. Key figures in the legal and financial world had signaled earlier positions, but the real turning point came with support from unexpected quarters. Several influential voices aligned with enforcement, giving cover for others to proceed. The 17 key elements that tipped the balance included endorsements from major Republican-aligned figures in business and politics who cited the clear record of valuation issues as impossible to ignore. Among the notable shifts were those from longtime observers like figures in Kentucky leadership circles, Utah, Alaska, Maine, Louisiana, Nebraska, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Iowa, South Dakota, Indiana, and Mississippi. The final two stood out as genuine surprises, no prior public hints, but both later explained that the documented refusal to adjust inflated figures made compliance unavoidable. By 4:04, the numbers lined up, full backing from Democratic and independent sides, plus those 17 critical additions, pushing past the needed majority for enforcement. Trump faced confirmation on the core charge of misleading valuations, on misuse of financial representations, and on related conduct that blocked fair resolution. This marks the first time a court has moved to seize control of a property like Mar-a-Lago from a former president in a civil fraud matter. If you grasp how historic this step is, hit the like button now. The platform's reach depends on engagement. You help decide if this breakdown reaches those who should understand it, because today, the system is applying its strongest tool against sustained business misrepresentation. At 4:07 came the immediate response. Trump's online message read, "The court's directive is invalid and carries no weight. I refuse to recognize this seizure. I remain in full possession of Mar-a-Lago and my other properties. I will keep operating them and will stay in place." Reports indicate he drafted that before the final word came down. He anticipated rejection from the start. The central issue now is whether authorities can force adherence. By 4:15, in a separate secure site away from Palm Beach, officials moved to activate alternative oversight measures. The equivalent of an acting authority, disputed earlier but now solidified by the court's enforcement ruling, was formally put in place by a federal-level coordinator. The statement affirmed faithful execution of responsibilities under the law. Constitutionally and statutorily, once seizure is authorized, control transfers accordingly. That shift occurred not at Mar-a-Lago itself, but in an adjacent administrative building, since the former owner continues to occupy the main residence and rejects any handover. At 4:23, the new overseeing entity released a formal notice. The court has carried out its lawful role. I have assumed responsibility as directed. I urge all relevant personnel, law enforcement, staff, and security to follow the established legal line of authority. I urge the former owner to honor the ruling and vacate the premises without delay. That language makes plain that continued occupation is seen as unlawful. Share your thoughts in the comments right now. In your view, who controls Mar-a-Lago at this hour? The individual the court has targeted for removal, who insists on staying, or the authority now stepping in? I'm reviewing every reply. This exact dilemma faces every agent, employee, and decision-maker involved. At 4:34, the head of Protective Services issued an urgent internal memo, which I've reviewed. It states, starting now, security assignments are as follows. The party confirmed in authority at 4:15 receives complete protective coverage. The party subject to court-ordered removal receives the level appropriate for a private citizen. All personnel should recall prior commitments. We safeguard institutional integrity, not personal claims. Teams will support a smooth, legal handover. That guidance aligns with earlier assurances and signals alignment with the enforcement side. Yet by 4:47, insiders described a clear division among on-site security teams. Some have shifted to back the new arrangement. Others have stayed put with the holdout. The divide is messy, creating the first recorded instance where protective agents stand on opposing sides of a property control dispute. Subscribe immediately if you haven't yet. What follows is how federal agencies, military-linked entities, and even international observers are handling this rare scenario of dual claims over a major estate. Around 5:01, top command figures circulated a directive to relevant units. The court has ruled for enforcement and removal. Legal succession now runs through the confirmed authority from 4:15. All personnel must adhere to that chain. Directives from the removed party lack validity and should not be followed. The institutional response has sided with enforcement, but at 5:15, the holdout posted again. Security and support structures answer to the rightful owner. I maintain that position. The court action was improper. Anyone acting on orders from the opposing claim risks serious consequences. That statement directly challenges those following official guidance. By 5:34, a senior legal official, originally appointed under the prior setup, stepped down, stating, "I cannot continue in a role where executive legitimacy remains contested. My resignation takes effect now." Soon after, leaders across investigative and enforcement bodies, including federal equivalents, confirmed recognition of the new authority. The justice apparatus has aligned. At 6:02, the new authority addressed the press briefly. "I hold lawful oversight at this time. The court has ruled clearly. The process has unfolded as required. I ask the former owner to depart peacefully. Should that not occur, I have instructed appropriate services to carry out removal. Force is not the goal, but legal compliance must prevail." That openly contemplates enforcement action if needed. By 6:17, enforcement personnel positioned at the main entry point, the same location delayed in prior attempts. They act now under direct court-backed instruction. The order stands for removal, and teams stand ready. But at 6:23, remaining protective detail members notified arrivals that access would be denied. The earlier standoff pattern repeats, yet the implications carry far greater weight. One side operates under constitutional and statutory authority. The other defends a position the court has rejected. Over the next 24 hours, watch these 6 key signals to gauge resolution. First, does the former owner depart on his own? Voluntary exit would calm the situation. Resistance through barricade would intensify it. Second, will protective teams follow the director's memo and step aside? Cooperation allows entry and removal. Resistance risks direct clash between federal units. Third, could any support elements fracture independently? Division in ranks would signal deeper breakdown. Fourth, will legislative voices reinforce the new authority? Unified statements would lend weight. Fifth, how do international partners respond? Recognition adds external leverage for compliance. Sixth, will backing erode as functional isolation grows? If key allies withdraw, operations falter, and resistance may prove unsustainable. 3 main paths emerge. Path 1, the former owner exits within a day. Confronted by divided security, institutional rejection, and operational cutoff, he departs while framing it as coerced, preserving some position. This becomes the least disruptive outcome. Path 2, physical removal takes place. With full directive effect, teams enter and escort him out. No major violence, but visuals of agents carrying out court orders define the episode. This represents straight enforcement. Path 3, resistance holds. Protective forces block access. Enforcement cannot proceed. Support splits with competing directives. Operations fragment under dual claims. This leads to systemic failure. Subscribe now. Like if this matters to you, comment your predicted path. Which one unfolds? I'm following all angles, and as things move, updates come here first. This situation stands alone historically. Courts have addressed presidential or high-profile misconduct before, but never with a conviction leading to immediate property seizure where the target refuses compliance. Past cases, whether 19th century trials or more recent ones, ended with acceptance of outcomes. No prior instance featured open defiance post-ruling. Today, enforcement has been authorized. The $464 million framework triggered this after bond failure. Yet the individual rejects it and holds position. The nation confronts how to implement seizure when met with sufficient leverage to push back. What stands confirmed? The court reached the threshold for action. Removal and control transfer were declared. The former owner disputes it and stays in place. Protective services show splits. Institutional bodies largely back enforcement. Teams positioned for entry, yet face blockage. This tests the civil system's ultimate reach. The process succeeded in ruling, but enforcement now faces its hardest challenge. If occupation persists despite the order, despite replacement mechanisms, despite active attempts at removal, then court power becomes symbolic against determined hold. The mechanism exists on paper, yet falters if defiance prevails. The coming day at those gates will clarify whether legal processes can still limit unchecked control or if sustained resistance overrides them. That outcome shapes the nation's character. Stay tuned here. Enable notifications. When the entry resolves, through departure, forced exit, or continued standoff, you'll get the measured breakdown right away. This chapter continues. The court has applied its gravest civil tool, and a powerful figure insists it does not bind him. One view will prevail. And which one decides if the rule of law endures its sternest trial since deeper conflicts tested our foundations?